Hello everyone, Sawadee Namaste. Welcome to the Rubber Industry NewsHour. This is a weekly program for rubber industry. We are on the episode number 10. I welcome you all for this special program. Every week it happens on Monday at this time. Before I start, let me give you some idea about what is Rubber Industry NewsHour. So that you get an idea, I will show you a short presentation about the Rubber Industry NewsHour. That's about the Rubber Industry NewsHour. I'm hoping that all of you understand what is the focus of this NewsHour in every week. We may not have everything in every week, but we cover a couple of key issues, key highlights every week. Let me give you some idea about the TechnoBiz. For the people who don't know about TechnoBiz, what kind of services we offer. There's a short presentation on the TechnoBiz as well. Let's have a look at the TechnoBiz profile, particularly for the rubber industry. that's about the TechnoBiz. I'm hoping that you get an idea what we are doing for the rubber and rubber, latex, and tire industries. So let's welcome you to today's episode number 10, Rubber Industry NewsHour. And let me give you some highlights of what we are going to have in this episode. The first, we'll have the market review by Mr. Jom Jacob. He will be discussing and sharing his views and market developments in the natural rubber. Then, as you know, this episode, we are focused on the alternate natural rubber. We have well-experienced specialists in the alternate natural rubber who will be sharing their experiences. The first, we have Dr. Michel Dorje, who's from France. He'll be talking about towards the European Guayule rubber supply chain. Then we have Dr. Katrina Cornish, as well-known, well-experienced researcher on the alternate natural rubber. We're talking about research developments and things happening in the alternate natural rubber. After that, we have Australian story by Michel Warway, he's the director of Guayule, Australia. So we have these are the three highlights about the alternate natural rubber. The first, we will have the natural rubber market review. Okay. So, and also we have a commercial program, basically the companies who advertise in the rubber industry business profile and also rubber industry business guide. So these are the main components of today's session. I do request, if you find this event today, the Rubber Industry NewsHour, useful, I do request you to share this information to your industry friends and colleagues and invite them to join this event on every Monday, same time. I'm sure that we are covering a lot of useful information for the benefit of the rubber industry. We're not just on technical, we talk on markets, business, practices, good practice and bad practice issues as well. Okay, I welcome you all for this NewsHour program every week. Okay, let's get to the first session today. Is a rubber market review. In this session, we have Mr. Jom Jacob, he's a rubber industry analyst, and he'll be speaking about the natural rubber market review. Let me brief you about Mr. Jom Jacob. He has been in the rubber industry for more than 30 years as a global rubber industry analyst and with extensive experience in analyzing the rubber market, forecasting industry trends, and formulating long-term policies and development plans for natural rubber sector. He served the Association of Natural Rubber Producing Countries, shortly called ANRPC, based in Kuala Lumpur, it's a senior economist for 11 years. Before that, he worked for the Rubber Board of India by holding various positions for 23 years. So let's welcome Mr. Jom Jacob to give a report on the natural rubber markets. Mr. Jom.
Hi all. Welcome to the Natural Rubber Market Review, episode number 10. Sentiment in natural rubber markets has been largely dominated by risk and uncertainties arising from the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the potential economic impacts of the massive sanctions announced by the West on Russia. The talk between foreign ministers of the two countries, Russia and Ukraine, helped in easing the geopolitical tension for a few days, but it did not last. Last few days have seen hopes for a ceasefire fading. As a result, crude oil prices again started gaining because the hopes faded for reaching a ceasefire. Another major development last week was the US Federal Reserve raised its short-term benchmark rate by 0.25 or a quarter of a percentage point on last Wednesday, that means March 16. This is the first rate hike by the Federal Reserve since 2018, after 2 years of holding the borrowing cost near zero to protect the economy from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Moreover, the Federal Reserve signaled rate hikes in all the 6 meetings of FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee, to be held during this year. Federal is compelled to adopt such an approach because it has to tackle the hottest inflation in 4 decades. A higher interest rate makes borrowing costs higher. Borrowing cost is going to be higher. It is risking economic recovery momentum. So equity markets immediately fell in response to the rate hike announced by the Federal Reserve. However, the Federal Reserve Chairman played down the risk of an economic recession and categorically stated that the economy is strong enough to withstand the tighter policy or a bit higher interest rates. So the equity average S&P 500, it closed 2% higher following the statement by the Federal Reserve Chairman. That was another major development last week. So these are geopolitical developments and also economic developments. Coming to the NR market fundamental, the supply, world supply of natural rubber remains seasonal low. This is a wintering off-season of supply in major producing countries, especially for the regions falling in the north of the equator. For the south of the equator, wintering season is July, August. So around more than 70% of the global rubber area is in the north of the equator, where wintering season is as of now. However, so the supply is low, but the outlook on the global demand for natural rubber has been weighed down by the potential economic repercussions of the Russia-Ukraine war and the economic sanctions announced by Russia. So we have a tight supply or seasonal low supply. At the same time, because of the war, the outlook on the demand outlook has been weighed down. As we know, natural rubber demand is heavily dependent on the auto sector, automobile industry. The war has aggravated the chip semiconductor shortage. The shortage, in fact, the auto industry was reeling under the semiconductor shortage. So the problem has been aggravated by the war because Ukraine and Russia are dominant suppliers of key metals, which are used in chip semiconductors and in the batteries used in electric vehicles. Prices of lithium, nickel, and other raw materials which are key to new energy vehicles, including electrical vehicles, have surged. Moreover, prices are expected to rise further as supplies are disrupted due to the war. So due to NR's heavy dependence on the auto industry, auto sector, the continuing Russia-Ukraine tussle can heavily weigh on the global demand prospects for NR. So this is a background. So fundamental supply is tight, but the demand has been weighed down. Outlook on demand has been weighed down by the sanctions as well as the repercussions of the war. So this is a background. With this, keeping this background in mind, let us see how NR prices performed in the last week, both in the futures and physical markets. We have 6 charts to be shown here. First of all, we have the Shanghai futures markets. Rubber futures traded on the Shanghai Futures Exchange. Last week, that is a week from 14 to 18 March, Shanghai rubber futures averaged 3.5% lower, and the average was 13,409 yuan per ton. So it fell compared to a week before. The prices averaged 3.5% lower. Now let us go to the second chart, chart number 2, that is on Cyclone rubber futures. TSR20 is the most popular grade traded on the Cyclone Futures Exchange, Cyclone Exchange. So during the last week, TSR20 futures traded on the SICOM exchange averaged 4.2% lower compared to a week before. So average during last week was $171.3 per 100 kilogram. Coming to Osaka, where chart number 3, coming to Osaka, the most popular grade is RSS3 futures, RSS3. So in fact, RSS3, it averaged lower compared to 1 week before, but the extent of fall was only 0.7%. And the average was 244.8 yen per kilogram. So this average price was 0.7% lower compared to the previous week, but compared to Shanghai and SICOM TSR20, the average fall, the fall in the average in the case of RSS3 Osaka was limited because RSS3, the physical market was tight. That could be one reason, and also Osaka market is sensitive to the yen. So yens, depending on the yen's strength against the dollar, Osaka futures can go up and down. So whenever yen is depreciating against dollar, the Osaka futures has a tendency to go up. So this is a reason. One is a dollar, one is the currency factor. The other factor is actually the RSS market remained tight during last week. That also could have helped Osaka futures. So these are the three futures market. Now we go into the physical markets. Chart number 4 compares the physical prices of STR20 FOB Bangkok and SMR20 FOB Kuala Lumpur during last week. The blue line shows the STR20. Last week, STR20 at Bangkok averaged 3.9% lower compared to a week before. So average price was $173.7 per 100 kilogram. SMR20 averaged 4.3% lower, and the average price was 171.9. Average 4.3% lower means compared to a week before, average price was 4.3% lower. Now, around 70% of the global trade is in the form of STR or ISNR, which are traded in different names like SMR, STR, or SVR. So this is a most important grade of natural rubber, which is globally traded. Looking into RSS market, physical market, chart number 5, RSS physical market. We have two markets. One is RSS3 at Bangkok and RSS4 at Kottayam. Bangkok market, the price is a FOB price, whereas the RSS4 at Kottayam market is in India. That is not FOB, that is a local price without including taxes or other charges. So interestingly, RSS3 Bangkok averaged 0.8% lower. Means the price fall in the case of RSS was relatively lower compared to that of STR20. So RSS3 Bangkok in the physical market averaged 0.8% lower, and the average price was $219.7, nearly $220 per 100 kilogram. But in sharp contrast to the case of RSS3 in Bangkok, the price of RSS4 at Kottayam, India, averaged 2.6% higher, while all the other market, both futures, physical, everywhere were falling. The RSS4 physical market in Kottayam, India, was actually going up went up during the last week. It averaged 2.6% higher compared to a week before. In fact, the higher increase in the price of Kottayam market was driven by a number of factors. One, of course, international price went up over the past 2 or 3 months, or maybe past 6 weeks. International price was going up, so that could be one reason. So the global Q could be one reason. And the second reason, most important reason, is the Indian rupee devalued against the dollar. It sharply devalued against the dollar. So the imported rubber is more expensive. So that means Indian importers or Indian auto tire industry has to pay more rupee to get $1. So Indian rupee devalued. So that means imported items became more expensive. So India is a net importer of natural rubber. Around 40 or 45% of the demand for natural rubber in the country is met by import. So that means imported rubber became more expensive because of the devaluation of the rupee, and also over the past 6 months there was a price rise in the world market. And another factor, the shipping costs increased and the global supply chain is disrupted. All these made imported natural rubber less attractive to the auto industry. And at the same time, in the domestic market, nearly 80% of the rubber is produced in the state of Kerala. In Kerala, this is a seasonal low supply period. So that is one reason. So these are the various factors which helped India to perform better. Means it helped the Indian market to be in the positive territory during the last week. We have one more slide, that is chart number 6. That is on latex market. Latex market, we have two important markets. One is Kuala Lumpur market, where the prices averaged 4.8% lower compared to a week before. And another important market is Bangkok, where the price averaged 3.6% lower compared to a week before. So these are the price review of the prices during last week. Now the next question, what can happen in the coming week? One important question I am always getting from people in the industry during the last 2-3 weeks is, oil price is going up. Then whenever oil price goes up, natural rubber price is supposed to go up. So this is a conventional belief among the investors. So they were expecting rubber price to explode, because oil price went up from below $90 to the level of $130, $135 over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So in fact, some of the industry people were expecting such an explosion in the case of natural rubber. So one important thing to note at this point is that when oil price increase, this is argument. When oil price increases, synthetic rubber, which is petroleum derived, became more expensive. So speculative investors think that those using synthetic rubber will switch over to natural rubber, and because of that, demand for natural rubber will go up. This is something like a belief among speculative investors in futures. One thing to be noted is that the substitution between natural rubber and synthetic rubber is very low, it's a marginal. And the basic reason is that because of the certain functions, certain parameters only natural rubber can meet. Synthetic rubber is not a perfect substitute for natural rubber. So certain functions and certain special parameters synthetic rubber may not be able to meet. That also depends from product to products. So first of all, natural rubber is not a perfect substitute for natural rubber. And because of that, production managers in different companies, they won't allow large scale substitution or interchange between these two. They won't usually agree. So substitution is very much limited between these two, number one. Number two, when natural rubber price goes up, it is giving a space for the synthetic rubber producers to revise up the price of synthetic rubber. So whenever natural rubber price goes up, automatically we can see the synthetic rubber price also going up, because the people in the synthetic rubber industry, the players are only limited. So they always use this as whenever NR price increases, they use that situation as an opportunity to revise up the synthetic rubber price. So that means the substitution, in that case, substitution may not be economically advantageous. And another thing, why oil price is going up now? It is not because of the heavy demand. Oil price goes up due to several reasons. One important reason, whenever suppose economy is growing at a very fast rate, oil price goes up because of the heavy demand from a growing economy. In that case, That is a positive news to the natural rubber market also. So means economy is expanding at a faster rate, oil demand is going up, and rubber demand, natural rubber demand will also go up in that way. But at the moment, we are concerned, investors and speculative market are concerned about, not about they are concerned about, they know that natural rubber price, synthetic rubber is becoming more expensive. But that need not translate into higher demand for natural rubber at the moment. At the moment, demand for natural rubber is way down because of the economic repercussions of the sanctions imposed on Russia, and also its potential implications on the auto sector. Auto sector is a major end user of natural rubber. So at the moment, what is dominating is the most dominating concern is the downward revision of the global demand due to the war, due to the economic sanction, and their economic impact on the and their impact on the auto sector. That is a dominating concern. So because of that factor is at the moment dominating. So because of that, investors are not considering the potential switchover between NR and SR. That is one thing. So coming to the new week, in this week, we don't expect any positive news. The Russia-Ukraine tussle is continuing, and today also we haven't seen any progress, and we are seeing no end in sight means we are not seeing any positive sign of reaching what is called reaching some kind of understanding or ceasefire between the two countries. So that is continuing. So the demand concern arising from the Russia-Ukraine war, I mean NR demand concern, especially in the auto sector, will continue dominating the market sentiment in the coming week. So that is a negative news. Of course, we have the low supply because of the seasonal factor that is there, but that factor will be over dominated by the demand concern. And also we have several negative sentiment because at this moment of time, speculative investors will be keeping away from a risky investment. So they will be looking for safe havens of like a US dollar, gold, or some currencies like a Swiss franc, Japanese yen. So whenever the risk and uncertainties are dominating the market, that means speculative investors are likely to stay away from risky investments, including natural rubber. So we don't expect a rebound in natural rubber in the coming week. We expect rubber price to perform a sideways movement during the coming week. So this is something expected. Roughly, I can say whatever happened in the last week can continue in the coming week. Thank you very much.
That's about the rubber industry market review, focusing on the natural rubber market. I'd like to invite all of you to join this session on the NR dialogue, which is scheduled in this week on the 24th March. This actually NR dialogue is hosted by Mr. John Jacob, and we are on the episode number 3. This is focusing on the Latin America natural rubber industry. We have invited 3 experts from the Latin America to talk about the opportunities, developments, and the challenges with the natural rubber industry in Latin America. So I do encourage all of you to participate in this session on the 24th March. Okay, the time is going to be 10:30 Brazil time. Okay, let's go to the next part is the rubber industry business profile. This is a commercial section of this rubber industry NewsHour. In this rubber industry business profile, we introduce the company profiles. This is a presentation. Today, we're introducing the company Guayule Components. This is a one-stop solution for all elastomeric needs. Let me show you the presentation on the Guayule Components, which is a one-stop solution for elastomeric needs. Okay, that's about the whole well components. If you're interested in their products and services, please reach out to them. As I said, this is a one-stop solution for all elastomeric needs. Now we are moving on to the rubber industry business talk. Okay, and in this business talk, we're focusing on the industry side. And today, in this rubber industry business talk, we have Dr. Michel Dorje. He is the president of the UTEX based in France. He'll be speaking on the towards a European Guayule rubber supply chain. Let me brief you about Dr. Michel Dorje. He has more than 30 years experience in the latex research and product development. He also has one of the 9 production process patents. He's a specialist, okay, with a huge experience on the latex research and products. So let's welcome Dr. Michel Dorje to make a presentation on the subject, the topic towards European Guayule rubber supply chain.
Hi. First, I would like to thank the organizer for his invitation. I'm really happy to talk about Guayule and also Dandelion, especially with Katrina Cornish and Michael Verve. So in my case, I will focus on the Guayule latex production, and Guatex is the first company who is producing natural latex in France, good for the planet and good for the people. I prepare this talk with all my colleagues and the co-owner of the company, Ali Amor, Fabrice Garrigue, and also Serge Palu, Daniel Pioche, and Eric Tardan from the CIRAD organization. All the company is based on a patented water-based extraction process, and this process has been developed by CIRAD organization and CTTM. CIRAD is an agronomical organization dedicated to the growth of crops, but also to the extraction process that we have to use in order to extract product from these crops. CTTM is a small technical center dedicated to material development. They develop, they control rubber and latex formulation and process. So you all know very well what is the natural EVA rubber market. It's mostly dedicated to the tire production. In a rubber form, polyisoprene, dry polyisoprene. But there is also 8% of the EVA polyisoprenes that is used in a latex form, polyisoprene dispersion, in order to produce gloves, foam, condom, textile. And we all know that Guayule latex has a huge advantages in comparisons to EVA latexes, is the fact that there is no allergenic problem with this latex. That's why I will rapidly focus on this latex market and forget all the rubber markets. In addition to this, you can see the evolution of the price, the rubber price on this slide. And we are actually near €2 per kilogram. And we will rapidly see also that with such low price, it will not be possible to produce only rubber with Guayule crops. In order to produce natural rubber and latex, there is several routes. All these routes are really interesting. We can use EVA tree, we can use Guayule bush, or we can use dandelion flowers. This different crop is adapted at different climates. You will have to focus on different localization. And in Europe, we can use Guayule and dandelion. It's not possible to grow EVA. There is also some competition through this crop and food crops. There is different level of advancement. Technological readiness level is fully different. There is a huge production of rubber and latex from EVA. It only starts with Guayule, and it's at a research state in the case of dandelion. Harvested are really different. In the case of Guayule, it's fully mechanical. We will not use hand in order to harvest a Guayule field. We can have an average yield per hectare around 1 ton per year and per hectare. I will use this figure later in my talk. So in this slide, I use a very nice map coming from a Katrina Cornish publication. And in this map, you can see that all the area in the world can have its own crop. For the tropical area, it will be rubber tree. For the semi-arid area, it will be Guayule. And for the continental area, it will be dandelion. In the case of Guayule, there is already a lot of company investing in this route. Two big companies, Bridgestone and Versalis, are investing in this route, and this company focus on the rubber market. They haven't got a lot of interest for the latex market that is too small, which is too small for this big company. Bridgestone in America have more than 100 hectares on an extraction unit using solvent in order to produce rubber. But there is also a lot of small companies like Ulex, Panaridus, Energien, Gais in Mexico, Guayule Australia in Australia, and Guatex in Europe. All these companies focus on the latex market. So the question is how it can be possible to produce with profitability and sustainability using these new crops. If we consider 1 ton per year and per hectare at a price of €2 per kilogram, it gives only €2,000 per hectare and per year. And in Europe, it is not enough. It will not be possible. So we have to find the right route in order to reach sustainability and profitability. I identify 4 different routes in order to reach this sustainability. Some companies invest a lot in order to increase agronomical yield. They try to develop new Guayule variety, new Guayule dandelion, and they try also to develop new technology like 3D farming, hydroponics routes in order to produce more crops per hectare. Another route can be to focus on the niche market, because on the niche market, the product will have higher value. It is exactly the case of the latex market, because we know that Guayule latex has no allergenic problem, and it gives a higher value for this kind of latex. We will follow this route in our case. Other companies like Bridgestone try to produce rubber, but in fact, they will never sell any rubber. They will sell tire. And in this case, the economical equation is fully different. So it's not a problem of profitability of the production of rubber, it's profitability of production of the tire. Another idea is to use bioraffinery strategy. We follow this route and we try to valorize all the co-products. With a Guayule biomass, it's possible to produce latex and rubber, but it's also possible to produce resin. And after latex and resin extraction, you can also valorize bagasse. The bagasse is the name of the biomass after latex and resin extraction. If you add the niche market and the bioraffinery strategy, it will be possible to reach profitability and sustainability. It is the same idea for all what we can call bioeconomy area. When you are working on such area, you have to identify a new biomass, and to produce this biomass, you have to develop a bioraffinery process in order to produce several co-products from this biomass, and you have to valorize all these co-products in order to have zero waste, zero effluent, to valorize all the co-products. It is exactly the same picture for the Guayule field. The first pillar will be to produce Guayule, and it will be the job of Valoris company, our partners. Valoris is specialized in the wasteland or marginal land valorization in the south of France. So farmer or cooperative which have a lot of land too hot where it's not possible to produce any food, they will suggest several plants, several crops, and it is exactly the case of Guayule. Guatex is the second pillar. Guatex will buy the biomass to the farmer and will extract latex, but also resin and bagasse. Guatex use a fully clean process using only water, no solvent, no chemical reaction. And we produce latex right now, and we will produce resin soon in order to valorize this resin in several applications. And after extraction of latex and resin, we will also valorize bagasse. So here is several Guayule field in the south of France. Some of these fields are quite young, some of these fields are older, and we plant all this field with Valoris company, and it is inside a project called Agro-Guayule project, financed by ADEME organization. We presently have more than 4 hectares of Guayule in the south of France. In addition to this field, we work on the extraction process. So you have to understand that polyisoprene particles are not in duct in the plant. Polyisoprene particles are enclosed inside the cell of the plant, especially in the bark. So we have to open all these cells in order to extract polyisoprene particles in a water-based process to separate polyisoprene particles to the biomass and to concentrate this polyisoprene in order to reconstitute a latex. So it is a kind of reconstitute latex. It's not the native latex which is inside the cell because we use a process. And the quality of the process will generate different quality of latexes at the end of the extraction. This process is fully patented. And of course, we have an international and exclusive license. And we are already developing new idea, and especially we work on the resin extraction in order to add this second co-product to our business. We start also the scale-up process, and we are now at a pilot scale, and we can produce 1 kilogram, 1 liter of latex per hour. So here is our pilot. It has been built by Imeca Process company, and we built this pilot in the case of a project called Figalex and financed by ADEME organization. Of course, we compare the quality of our latex to standard natural latex, EVA latex. We formulate this both latex with the same formulation using zinc oxide, sulfur, antioxidant, and accelerator. In this specific slide, we don't use coagulation process in order to produce a film. We use a drying process at ambient temperature, and after drying, we cure the film in order to vulcanize polymer. The red curve corresponds to the EVA latex film, and the green curve corresponds to the Guayule latex film. It is a traction experiment, and here is the stress versus strain. The main difference is the fact that the strain at break in the case of Guayule is higher in comparison to EVA strain at break. And if we have a look at the beginning of the curve, we can see that the elastic modulus of Guayule latex film is lower than elastic modulus of EVA latex film. So it's a quite classical difference. There is a lot of publication dealing about this difference. And the main explanation is the fact that guayule polyisoprene is less branched and with higher molecular mass. All this quality explain why we would like to focus on the glove market, because it will allow to produce glove thinner. It will allow to produce safer glove because hypoallergenic and more sustainable glove. And all these gloves will be produced with a guayule, locally produced, a natural latex, an European latex, hypoallergenic, which give flexible film. Latex will be also used in order to produce toys, medical device, condom, textile. And in addition to the latex, we will also produce resin that can be used in cosmetics, fragrance, wood preservation, paint and coating, pharmaceutical and adhesive. And after latex and resin extraction, the biomass that is called bagasse will be used in order to be transformed in wood panel or other goods. In order to manage this company, we build a twin head with a technical person and a business person. Fabrice Garrigue is a businessman. He was previously a manager of business unit in Rhodia company, and he creates Evertree startup for Avril company. He reached Guatex 1 year ago. In my case, I worked 10 years long for Rhodia organization, developing knowledge concerning synthetic latex and a lot of patents dealing about the relation between synthesis routes, particle structure, and applicative parameter. I spent also 20 years in CTTM, dedicated to rubber and latex application, and mostly natural latex and rubber. I start with EVA latex, but I switched also 10 years ago to guayule and also dandelion latex to develop this kind of new routes. I already talked about Serge Palu and Daniel Pioche. They are the co-owner of the company. Serge Palu started to be involved in guayule research 40 years ago. In the case of Daniel Pioche, he started to be involved in guayule extraction 20 years ago. Ali Amor, 10 years ago, started the extraction, water-based extraction on a guayule, and he is the main inventor of the patent. In addition to Ali, we work also with Amandine Rousset, who is developing the resin extraction technology. And in addition to all this core team, there is also Lazare Mesnier and Cindy Savanier, 2 persons who are involved in the quality control of the latex. But there is also an ecosystem, a French ecosystem around the company, because we work with Valoris company with the help of CIRAD organization. The process has been built by Imeca Process, a very interesting company. And for the latex application, we have built a strong link with Pircan company, MAPA and Regeltex. These 3 companies produce gloves in France, and especially industrial glove for very specific application. So in the following years, we will produce more and more guayule latex. Presently, we have a 1 liter per hour extraction pilot. It's a pre-marketing products qualification step, and we will increase this production capacity in the following years, and we will also add resin extraction. Once latex quality and resin quality will be fully validated, we will start industrial scale-up with our clients, and we will build our demo unit and our industrial unit in order to produce tons and tons versus years. So as a summary, as a conclusion, we can say that this is a very green route, a very clean route in order to produce natural latex. There is no solvent, only water, no waste, zero effluent. We will produce latex, but also resin and bagasse. For the farmer, it will be a good opportunity to diversify their production and to valorize their wasteland. For the business, it will be also a good opportunity. For our clients, it will be possible for them to switch from petro-sourced raw material to bio-sourced raw material. And there is a lot of organizations that would like to be less dependent of petroleum cost. And we will start our sale and to produce at an industrial scale in 1 or 2 years. Thanks for your attention. I'm fully open to all of your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Michel. Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed this, the environmental friendly process of the latex production from the ULE. And before I let you go, I have a couple of questions to ask you on behalf of the audience. You talk about at this moment it's in the pilot scale. Probably give you some idea what kind of investment cost for the refinery and overall economics of this kind of latex.
So we make a lot of evaluation of the invest cost. We already buy our extraction unit and we make some extrapolation to the demo scale and the industrial scale extraction unit. What is clearly sure is that if you produce only rubber, it will not cover the production cost. It's not possible. At €2 per kilogram for the rubber, it's not possible to cover the production cost. That's why we will focus on the latex market. And in addition, we will valorize the co-product. And if you have a look to all the small companies like Energien, Guayule Australia, we all follow the same kind of route because we all know that it will not be profitable to produce rubber alone.
And I think the value about the biomass and the resins, it gives more value for the whole process. Is it right? Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
The value of the byproducts or co-products, it will be more the feasible process, not only just the latex, but also the resins and the biomass gives more value for the whole, this economic.
In our business model, we use value corresponding to the raw material already existing. For example, the value of the resin, Guayule resin, in our business model is similar to the pin resin. In the case of the bagasse, we use the value of wood panel because it will be the same kind of value. And if we add all this value, it's possible to reach sustainability and profitability.
So can you talk about what kind of investment opportunities and the cooperation with Ultex? Anybody interested to invest jointly, work with you, or what options or opportunities are available?
So Guatex has been built 3 years ago. So we are a small company. We start our extrapolation process, and we open a first fundraising. So we are now open to investor in order to go faster, to accelerate, and to become bigger and bigger as fast as possible. In addition to this, we are open to collaboration, worldwide collaboration. We already have some collaboration with a lot of countries. Some people want to produce biomass and ask us to extract latex and co-product. Some other companies want to compare different kind of extraction process, because you can use water-based process, but you can also use solvent-based process in order to produce latex and rubber. And some companies want to compare the different routes in order to see if the quality of the product will be the same or not.
And are there any standards, quality standards for the oily latex, similar to the heavier latex?
Yeah. Thanks to Ulex company. Ulex is an American company which started 20 years ago. In fact, they stopped producing Guayule right now, but they managed to validate an ASTM standard in America. So you can use the standard in order to qualify the quality of your latex. And in this standard, there is also Guayule, but dandelion. So it's possible to have a quality evaluation using this ASTM normalization. In addition to this, Ulex managed to produce gloves with a very big company like Ansel or other company, and to have a Food and Drug Administration agreement. So they managed to have approval of this kind of organization for glove producers with Guayule latex. So there is already some normalization step already done, and we are really near to the market.
Super. And can you tell how much area has been planted so far in Europe for the?
In Europe, in France, there is around 3 to 4 hectares. There is also some hectare in Spain. It's a research field, but I think that there is a lot of hectare in Italy, because Versalis want to produce as soon as possible, and they claim 1,000, but maybe it's 100 hectare of Guayule in Italy or in Sicily, maybe less. We don't know exactly because it's very confidential.
Understood. And is the farmers also supportive, understand about this opportunity? The farmers,
Farmers are really interested with this opportunity for several reasons. The first one is that they want to diversify the production. It's not a good thing to produce only one crops for one application. They want to have several applications and several crops. And another important aspect is the fact that with the climate warming, a lot of field, it's impossible to produce food in this field because temperature is too high or the quality of the soil is not high enough. And in such a case, farmers are really happy to use Guayule. It's a real in Europe. I know that it's a real problem also in Arizona, in America, because it's more and more difficult to produce food, and they would like to switch to Guayule production that need lower water.
Super, Dr. Michel. Thank you very much. You gave a lot of insights about this whole Guayule latex and opportunities. I'm sure that your company will grow faster rate and lot of opportunities for the industry and all, because there are a lot of proper benefits are there in terms of the quality, allergens issues also there. So thank you for joining this session, Dr. Michel. Appreciate participation.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that's about the presentation on the Guayule rubber, towards European supply chain by Dr. Michel Doré. And so let's move on to the next part of the program. We are here on the now we are focusing on the research aspects of it, and the same again on the alternate natural rubber, on the rubber industry research. In this session, we have, I call it the researcher, the legendary researcher on the alternate natural rubber, Dr. Katrina Cornish. She is currently a research director at the Ohio State University in USA. We'll be discussing about what's happening in USA about the alternate natural rubber options, what opportunities and challenges. And so let me brief you about Dr. Katrina first, about her background. She is the leading US scientific expert and is internationally recognized as principal authority on alternative natural rubber production properties and products, and also on the natural rubber biosynthesis in general. Her inventions at the U.S. Department of Agriculture were licensed by ULEX and formed the foundation of U.S. domestic industry. She led the Department of Agriculture development of domestic natural rubber and rubber latex sources for more than 15 years. And also, she was also senior vice president of the at R&D at the ULEX. Currently, she is a research director at the Ohio State University, and she has more than 150 publications and many patents, and of which 120 publications are focused on the rubber biosynthesis and production. She received a number of awards. I have a long list of awards, but I can tell you, Dr. Katrina Cornish is the person we want to know about alternate natural rubber. She is the person who knows ins and outs of the various options of alternate natural rubber. Before I invite her, I have prepared a short presentation about her. Let me show you all about her profile, and also some additional information on her work as well. Okay, that's the short presentation on her work activities at the Ohio State University. So let's invite Dr. Katrina Cornish. Dr. Katrina, please come forward. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very good. Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this.
Well, actually, it's a pleasure to have you. And as I'm very much familiar that your extensive research work in 30+ years, you are not only a researcher but also an entrepreneur, advising in many companies. I wonder how you manage your time.
Yes, what time? No, that's very true. I have actually had to let one or two of my startup companies go into abeyance because I don't have enough time to do them all. But Energene is my main company. That is the Guayule latex production company in the States. Also, everybody open for investment. We're fundraising at this time. And then American Sustainable Rubber is the hydroponic dandelion company in the States. I'd be happy to put anybody in touch with them if they are interested. There's quite a lot of different things there, but you know, I have got 2 sons through school. There's a dog in the background, but I do have actually over 300 publications now. So it does become, you know, you work hard. What can you say? You have to believe in what you're doing. You know, I am really alternative natural rubber is really important because we need biological diversity and we need geographical diversity to meet increasing demands. You know, the amount of rubber that Africa is going to need, for example, Havea is going to have a tremendous difficulty in meeting a doubling of demand, for example.
Well, let's check with you now. You've been a research director of the Program of Excellence in Natural Rubber Alternatives at the Ohio Agriculture Research and Development Center at the Ohio State University. Can you talk about what is this program about? It's been there, I think, since how many years there?
Yes. This actually had been formed as a group before I even joined OSU, and I was basically brought in to, basically to run it, you know, in a sense. I'm the research director of that group. It's an industrial academic consortium. So it's set up a little bit like an NSF IUCRC, if you're familiar with those, but where the industrial partners contribute funds to help pre-patented research, you know, the stuff that they could all share before they take the information off and make their own proprietary tires, for example. And it has been largely supported by automotive and tire companies. So different members at different times, but we've had Ford, Goodyear, Cooper, and Bridgestone at one time or another. Goodyear has recently bought Cooper, so there's just Goodyear there at the moment, and American Sustainable Rubber is a PENRA member. And then our academic partners are Oregon State University, Nebraska University, University of Akron, and OSU, you know, the Ohio State University. And this is really useful because it allows us to have field trials in different places. So we do all the extraction in Worcester, but we develop the agronomic requirements and germplasm for other regions in the US. So that's so that's what we do. And then the group itself, we have a pilot plant. You saw some pictures that you showed in the slides, and it allows us to apply for the large grants because we have a processing plant and we have this consortium already in place. So that's been very valuable, but we're just finishing up a USDA Biomass Research and Development Initiative grant, which we got for $2 million, for example. And we have several other large grants in process that we're trying to do.
So this research program is only focusing on the alternate natural rubber, also any property improvements of the natural rubber itself?
So some of it, so certainly in my program, which we could say is in PENRA or not, as you wish. You know, all the dandelion work is definitely in PENRA. but we've done a lot of work with natural rubber from Hevea and some synthetic rubber and Guayule, where we have a lot more material to work with on sustainable processing aids, waste-derived reinforcing fillers as partial replacements of silica and carbon black, things like that. So we do a lot of work on 100% crop consumption, so we can try and make for green production systems, real biosystems with zero to landfills. What's the best, most profitable thing to do with all the different things that we produce as you do a process. So, for example, with Guayule, we take the leaves off first with the cryodefoliation process, but that's a valuable stream. You can extract a Canuba type wax from it if you wish, or you can just pelletize it and use it to power a biomass boiler at your processing plant. Those sorts of things. But it all gets used.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of zero waste policy type. Yeah. Okay, let's get into the dandelion. I think you have worked a lot on the dandelion. Okay, and so what is current situation about the dandelion research work, as well as whether it is commercialized on the process wise? What is status now?
Yeah, there's several different companies in the States working on the dandelion. Cultivat in St. Louis, Missouri, Farm Materials out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and American Sustainable Rubber, which is that was out of Chicago originally. It's recently been bought by Hemp, so I guess it's now out of Colorado. But the main issue in the field is weed control. We have got inbred lines now, thanks to one of our professors here, Jonathan Fresnedo, which are very useful. We have got gene editing technology and transformation technologies with the dandelion. We can even do chloroplast transformation. So the big issue is making it sturdy enough to compete in the field with weeds. We have good weeds here. And also to have a high enough yield so that the cost analyses look profitable. And so, for example, I know ASR, for example, has done cost analyses in a greenhouse system without adding the vertical parameter, so just single layer hydroponics, and that works if you also make use of the greens, so you could eat the greens. The real advantage in a hydroponic system is the multiple harvests that you can do. And it's also a very high throughput phenotyping system that we use to find those rare plants that have the much higher yields. Now, the highest I've ever seen in our collection here, unfortunately this was early on, and it's a dead plant, because we killed it before we found out how much it had, that was 22.8%. which is would be very nice, whereas the lines that we're currently growing are about 8% on a dry weight basis. And the other interesting thing with the dandelion, if you're field growing it, most of the latex will be coagulated during the life of the plant. So it makes sense for that to be a solid rubber producer, which is what most companies, apart from ASR, are looking at. As a supplement for tire rubber, because its physical properties are very similar to Hevea, whereas Guayule, of course, is a softer, stretchier, different material than the other two, which do seem to be very similar.
And the dandelion, anybody's in farmers also accepting to grow? And what situation farmers?
Yeah, it's mostly on the experimental farm, but Farm Materials has commercial farms. They're planting. They're planting this spring. They've come to an agreement with OSU for 1 million of the OSU seeds from one of the advanced populations. So that's actually waiting for pickup right now. And then with Guayule, of course, we have, Energene has 150 million seeds of advanced lines that have 9 to 11%. So that we're ready to go on that as well. But at the moment, the only public source, if you like, source of seed is OSU. Okay. You could get very small amounts from the Germplasm Center at USDA, which is where our stuff started. Their collection in 2008, I think, from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan region. That's where all our population begins from, and we have a Sino-Russo collection as well.
So the seeds are exporting to other countries as well.
We've sent small amounts to other countries. At the moment, we're doing mostly in the US. If you send large quantities, it's possible under the appropriate agreements, but you would need to have your phytosanitary certificates in place and that sort of thing. So that the last thing you want is to say ship some to India, and there's been quite a lot of interest in India for Guayule in the northern region there, where it's dry, you know. You don't let any of your seeds sit on a dock for 3 months in the heat or something while the customs are trying to work out how to let it go to the recipient. So you do need to be a bit careful about shipping stuff.
So when you compare with this dandelion and and Guayule, and which one is a better alternative? Okay, you mentioned, of course, dandelion is more solid rubber, and the Guayule is on the liquid side more. Okay, but in terms of the properties, can you talk about the properties and the strengths and?
Yeah, well, as I say, the dandelion rubber is pretty similar to like a TSR20. You know, it's very similar sort of material. And the hydroponic dandelion might end up being a source of latex. So don't get me wrong. It's just if it's field grown, you're growing it as an annual plant, then it's for solid rubber. We are looking at the latex, though, of course, see whether it will make a good glove. There is cross-reactivity with the latex allergy proteins in Hevea. Again, it's quite a safe material provided you have proper manufacturing processes in your glove manufacturing. So it's not something to exclude. But Guayule has different properties. So my favorite is Guayule. I've worked on it the longest. I've only really intensively worked on dandelion for the last 11 years or so since I've been at OSU. Whereas I've had a whole career on the Guayule because it's such a lovely elastomeric material for latex. You know, it's thin, you make very thin films that are very strong. It stretches more. You know, for example, you can make an 11-inch balloon on a 9-inch former, for example. And it has other really interesting properties that the others don't have. So from a basic research point of view, if you freeze fracture rubber particles, the insides of Guayule rubber particles still stretch in liquid nitrogen. Well, no other polymer I know does that. So we'd still very much like to get to the root of that cause. And then the other thing that's really good with Guayule is it's got a higher polymer-filler interaction than the others because it's basically a linear molecule, not a branched molecule. So I think that makes that more intimate interaction between the polymer and the filler. And that's why we're able to develop this radiation attenuation natural medical examination glove. You know, so it's not a personal protective equipment. It's actually a medical one, and so you could not have to double glove, which the FDA wants our healthcare workers to do. Put one glove on for disease and one glove on for radiation protection if you're using, say, C-arm procedure. With a Guayule glove of that type, you can have just one glove doing both jobs. So we hope to get that through FDA next year. And then, of course, we're also working with the greater group on standards. There was a question to Michelle earlier about standards. And although we do have 1076, which is D1076, which is the latex standard, there are different categories in that, so that you can look at your latex and see which one it fits and then claim that. But we're also looking now at, will it be possible to generate like standard, like SMR grades, you know, technically specified grades of alternative rubbers. But the groups that are working on that, there's working groups for both dandelion and Guayule. But it seems like the most important thing to start with is to come up with a standard quantification method. So how much rubber does your germplasm have, for example, or how much rubber does your process get out, you know, so that we can try and get that to apples. Whereas at the moment, lots of different methods are being used. So somebody says, well, I use this method, my plants have this much, somebody else uses a different method and say, I disagree, your plants don't have that much, or they have more, that sort of thing. So certainly ASTM is certainly interested in developing those standards. And we're doing what we can to help them, of course, because we've got the materials and have experience with ASTM for a long time.
Even the heavier plantations also, I think, as you know very well, is affected by the climate change, okay, and also the diseases, number of other challenging issues, weather conditions. We have floods, so we can't, get a source of. Do you think these alternate natural rubber, whether Dandelion or Guayule, can plant in, conditions like in Asian or in African, where heavier is popular? Is it possible? It can be complement, yeah.
I don't think they're going to share the same region. Michel Dorger showed the map he took from one of my presentations. I think we have, Havere is tropical. Our two species are not tropical. So I think it would be very difficult to do it. But Guayule is semi-arid. It comes from the Chihuahuan Desert. And this is really important now. I think farmer resistance to growing these alternatives in the southwestern region of the United States is taking a huge new look at it. I think resistance is going away because in this last year, both California and Arizona, who've been under a decades-long drought, have finally reduced the amount of water they are allowing their farmers. And it's been cut by 40%, which is a lot. Now, Guayule is very happy on 60% of what they're used to using, but a lot of their crops would not be able to be grown now with that lower amount of water. And so I think that gives Guayule a huge boost in the southwestern United States, which runs anywhere from California all the way over to West Texas. Now, dandelion does need water. But that can be grown in snowy regions, so Northern Europe, Canada, Northern US, it comes from, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, where they have hard winters. So Guayule can't grow under snow. It can take some snow. It does have a little bit of cold tolerance and frost tolerance, but if it's buried in the snow for a protracted period, it will die. Whereas dandelion is quite happy sitting under the snow for all winter if you are growing it, if you are doing an overwintering crop. And then dandelion too can be grown in the southern states as a winter crop. So you have it grown as sort of a regular annual in the northern states, but a winter crop in the southern states. And then of course there's the hydroponic option or aeroponic options for dandelion, which aren't practical for Guayule, which is a bush. But they both have the opportunity of multiple harvests from the same plants. So Guayule, you cut the tops off, regrow it, cut the tops off, regrow it. So after your initial harvest, which depending on your planting date would be 18 months to 2 years, after that, each plant can be harvested again pretty much every year. So, and it's not dependent on a season for harvest. So you can harvest any day of the year, which is very nice in terms of reducing CapEx costs. And your process can be running all year round. So it's not like tomato peels, where the tomato processing all takes place in the fall in the US, and then the plant is shut down for the rest of till the next autumn. A Guayule latex extraction plant goes all year round.
How about the yield rates? Yield rates of the rubber from dandelion as well. You are specialized on the biosynthesis. Are you working on increasing the yields or any special genome technology or anything?
Yes, we are. We do that in both species, but dandelion, being a little herbaceous plant, is a very nice molecular biology sort of system. So there we have a number of different approaches for diverting carbon to rubber. So yeah, so we use CRISPR gene editing, for example. We've got a bunch of plants we're growing up now. They've made it out of tissue culture and are now in the greenhouse, And so hopefully this, in a few months when they're big enough, we can actually see whether the gene editing we did to increase yield has worked. We did actually take a similar approach a few years ago, but we only edited one site in the gene, and this time we did two because we lost it during the breeding process. So hopefully this time we won't.
So there is progress is happening there in yields.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's very hands dependent sort of work. So the amount of effort that goes on at any particular time depends on how much funding I have and how many students I have that can do that work. So we're at a bit of a low at the moment. But,
and like you go back to your companies now, look into your entrepreneurial activities. But before go to entrepreneurial, you work with Ulex for 10+ years, is it right? Yeah.
Well, I actually worked for Ulex for 6 years, but prior to that, Ulex were the licensee of the latex extraction process I invented at USDA. And then back in 2004, they asked me if would I please move over to the company, because their investors were saying if I didn't, they were going to pull the plug. They needed Ulex to have a stronger scientific basis. So I worked for them for first in Southern California for 3 years, and then got transferred over to Arizona for 3 years. And so so I learned a lot. That was very interesting. So the first 3 years it was being built for sale, but it didn't sell. And then after that, its efforts to convert to an operating company didn't go very well. And after I left in 2010 to join OSU, it was a couple of years after that, Ulex went under. They went bankrupt and sold everything off. Now I do think this, and that was Ulex Inc. Now, which I think there is a Ulex LLC still out there, but they're not producing Guayule latex that I'm aware of.
But I think they did some good promotion on the Guayule, in terms of the branding, the Guayule applications wise in that period. Is it right?
Getting the 510K with FDA for the examination glove was very good. So yes. And other companies made many other things, so a Foley catheter was successfully made with Guayule, surgeon's gloves were made with Guayule, all sorts of balloons, many tires, of course. Cooper Tire made 100% Guayule tire just a very few years ago under a Birdie grant. So you can make anything out of Guayule that you make out of any of the others, out of Havea. So it's a very nice material. The different types of, going back to the quality question that you mentioned, if you do what I think Visalis and Bridgestone are now thinking of doing, is taking the solid rubber which you solvent extracted, so you now have solvent extracted rubber, and you turn that back into a latex, it won't be the same latex as Guayule latex such as we extract. Or that Michel Dorget extracts, or or Nokian or Weiss, any of these other companies, because those are the intact rubber particles. And I think, as everybody knows, the membrane components of a rubber particle become an integral part of the compound. And so they will change the properties of the rubber. So if you've done a solvent extraction, all those membrane components are gone. And you'll then have a stabilization medium, a detergent or something instead that forms the micelle, but it won't behave the same way as a natural, as the original latex would do. It's probably, this is just a prediction, it's probably end up behaving much more like a polyisoprene, a synthetic polyisoprene than a natural latex.
I wanted to get to know more about your company, Energy In.
Yes.
That's so. Can you give more details about this this company? I think you're talking about the funding opportunities also there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, please.
Yes. So and it's pronounced Energene, so the Y is silent. We set this company up, I think it was 2013, to bring Guayule latex back again after Ulex failed. And we developed new technologies at OSU, which are licensed to Energene exclusively. So we have a new, an issued patent that issued, I think, in 2018 on improved processing. Because one of the things was, how having worked for Ulex, I could see where their build of the, at least in the demonstration plant, where their pain points were, so I could address those specifically. And so we have a new processing patent that's got a lot of legs on it yet. We also have some other related patents. We have germplasm patents, and also as a pending patent on the radiation, the Guayule radiation attenuation glove. So we have, then we also have detailed business plans and financials, everything from upgrading the pilot plant to a continuous flow, it's batch, the pilot plant, of course, out to building a full-size biorefinery, and anything from a 5-year plan out to a 15-year plan, depending on what somebody wants to see. That includes all the costs in it. And once they get into production, it's a bit like when ethanol started. You know, getting the first ethanol plant up was a just horrendous effort, and I think the government had to really contribute to doing that. But after that, then they sprang up all over the place. And it's the same with an energy and biorefinery. As soon as we get the first one up, and it goes into production and it's making money, then you just go to the bank for the rest. But the US alone, if we do it at the scale that we're looking at just for self-sustainability, needs 600 of these, you know, because as it's fresh shrub processing for latex, you don't want a massive plant. You want fairly small ones, so that the transportation of your shrub or your roots, they don't have to go very far. So we're saying you want to be within a 25-mile radius of your processing plant, and then you go down the road, and then you have another processing plant to serve the next part of the next area of Guayule. But it's a modular build, so very cookie cutter. You know, once you've made one, you can just copy it. If you have a high density of shrub in a particular area, you just put in effect 2 processing lines in instead of 1. You know, so it's very reproducible in that way. So,
is the government giving some support for you on this?
Well,
projects?
Not yet, but we're really working toward that. So, Energy got a conference grant from USDA. And we finally had that meeting last year. It was stalled because of COVID, of course, but we had this hybrid meeting, and this was to try and pull together all the people that are interested in natural rubber and natural rubber supply security, which has been a real trial in the US. I've even heard of some American companies having to fly rubber in. So, you know, that certainly put the cost up for them. But anyway, so the US government is now working on trying to pull together an interagency program. So not just USDA, but USDA and DOE and the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation and the National Institutes of Health, you know, just pull all of them together and say, we need natural rubber in the US. There's no sector of our economy is independent of a natural rubber supply. You know, we have to have it, and we don't have it. And most of it comes from Southeast Asia, which is the other side of the world. And, you know, with the supply chain issues, you know, the enormous number of container ships just sitting off our ports, that even if some rubber was sent, it has still got to get it to the factory, you know. And so these are making certainly our military and homeland security people very nervous again. They finally noticed again, just a minute, you know, you mean we can't fight a war if we don't have any natural rubber, and we don't have any? This is so I'm hoping that this time it will actually establish permanently. And if you know, if disease felled Hevea, which is possible, you know, this is a clonal tree. Just look how fast the leaf blights, you know, the Pesilotiopsis and Neophusicoccus spread in 2019 and 20. You know, Hevea could face a collapse. And if we have a significant amount, if we already have an industry, you could scale that very quickly. If you don't, it would be very much more painful. And then I did hear just last month that Thailand announced they had 40 acres of virus infection. And it's like, oh my goodness. And I was thinking, well, look how fast coronavirus spread. How fast is that Thailand leaf virus going to spread, you know? So I think that biological and geographical diversity are very much at the core of global natural rubber. You know, we should not rely just on one clonal species. It's just too dangerous for us all, I think.
You also involved in one other company called American Sustainable Rubber Company, is it right? You know, what
Yes,
kind of activity?
Yeah, I'm a scientific advisor to them. They are they've licensed some technology from my OSU program. The core technology, though, is the hydroponic technology, and our university decided not to try and patent that. Though we do have one with CTTM. But they decided it would be too difficult to defend such a patent, so they didn't go for it. However, the company is based on the hydroponic dandelion as a highly productive rubber production system. And if there became a major problem with the US rubber supply, intensive vertical farming of rubber would be the fastest way to replace the rubber or to make meaningful amounts. Because there's lots of warehouses you could put things in. It's just how fast can you go? You could convert a bunch of the ones already there to make herbs and lettuces and things like that to a rubber production system. So I think now that type of system is more expensive farming method than growing it in the field. But you have a lot of other issues where it can be better. You know, you don't have to worry about escapes if you were doing gene-edited plants and things like that. So so that company, that one's also open for investment, guys. You know, all of these startups are all looking for investments.
Yeah.
So,
and how is it tire industry is doing? Any active research, actively involved in US tire industry in getting a local supply, you know, like alternate natural rubber? What kind of activities happening there?
Yeah, well, this is why Bridgestone has invested in Guayule. They're going to loan it, but they have their bio-rubber pilot plant in Mesa and their research farm in Eloy, and then Goodyear has for some years supported Penra in the dandelion rubber. And the original premise of all of this is if we could produce, say, 10% of the US supply domestically in the country, that would have a significant impact on price volatility in the Havea natural rubber market. You know, it would have a calming influence. But unfortunately, when you're working with the tire companies, they want it at a commodity price. And as Michelle said, you can't have it at a commodity price if you've only got 10 acres or 100 acres or even 1,000 acres and a pilot plant. It doesn't work that way. You have no economies of scale. You have to go in. I said this for 35 years, really. So you have to be commercially viable in normal times, not just in emergencies. So that's where Guayule, why alternative natural rubber in the States has not taken hold. They put a lot of money in whenever there's emergency, and then they take all the money away again when the emergency is over. You know, and so this doesn't work. So this is why when type 1 latex allergy hit, why I really put a lot of effort when I found that there was no cross reaction between Guayule latex proteins and Havea latex proteins. There was an opportunity for Guayule latex that would be profitable in normal economic times. So get the crop established that way. And so, and you can make these specialty products with relatively small processing capacities and relatively small acreages. But you can't get to commodities until you've got at least, 10 processing plants and 100,000 acres at least, those sorts of scales. But you can't get there without going through the premium markets, or it's extraordinarily more difficult to get there. So
you did work on the bio-based fillers for the applications in the rubber industry.
Yes,
like
yes.
Eggs, from eggs and those egg shells and stuff like that. And can you talk about what are status, what kind of bio-based fillers you develop as a researcher?
Yes.
Are they patented? Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're not actually patented, to my regret. because when we put a patent in, the patent office wanted to divide them up completely. So we put in several fillers and SBR, Havea natural rubber and Guayule natural rubber, and they wanted to then split them apart. So instead of having them all in one, you'd have, okay, eggshells in Guayule, then you'd have eggshells in Havea, and then you'd have eggshells in SBR, and all those being separate patents. Well, the cost was just completely prohibitive. It was impossible to do that. But however, the eggshell one, which is a really attractive material because it's produced every day of the year, so it's like, you know, it's not like tomato peels, which is the other one we did a lot of work with. They're only produced in the autumn. But the eggshells, what we found was if you ground them to a micro scale, so small micro, you don't have to go all the way to nano. If you went all the way to nano, you could get a very good replacement in Guayule, you know, completely replace carbon black, but of course it's very expensive to grind to nano. So it's not very expensive to grind to micro. But we found that with a partial replacement of the reinforcing fillers, like carbon black or bifunctionalized silica, that you could get very good properties with partial replacements, even 60 or 70% replacement. And one of the things that's happening is quite apart from the interaction of the eggshell microstructure with the rubber polymers, those eggshells seem to act like tiny little ball mills in the mixer, so that they disperse the other filler better, because the fillers tend to aggregate because they like themselves more than they like the rubber. And with the eggshells in there, we got a better dispersion of the other filler in addition to a really good dispersion of the eggshell. Okay, so that one is actually available in, you know, 10 kilogram plus quantities. So it's being distributed by a company called Peloton Technologies. So if anybody wants to try the eggshell filler, I could put you in touch with Rob Yenny. And so that is actually on the low commercial availability scale. The other one that we worked on, which is very interesting filler, was from tomato peels, so processing tomatoes. These are made, both of these fillers, both of these materials, wastes, are produced in like 600,000 tons a year. So these are enough to make a meaningful difference in a filler market if you're doing a partial replacement. But they're only produced, as I said, one time a year. And they were lightweight filler. And they are also pretty attractive in a plastic, because they are basically a cutin and wax based, more polyester type of filler than the eggshells, which are. And I was surprised, I have to admit, Param. I thought when we first looked at the eggshells that it was just going to be a sustainable form of calcium carbonate. So stop mining it, just use the eggshells, you know. But they actually did turn out to have some reinforcing properties that we weren't really expecting. But that was very nice to see.
Did you do any cost analysis of making of that filler in terms of collection? Because so many eggs are there, people eat every day, you know, all over the world.
Yes, yes, absolutely. But we're working with some major egg processing companies in the States. So I can't comment on the cost of doing it. That would have to be something you'd take up with Peloton Technologies, which is a distributor. But nonetheless, certainly in the more premium markets, we've certainly had interest from sporting goods people about them, as well as from hoses and, you know, so a number of different types of industries have been trialing the eggshell material.
Because I think most of the companies are also looking towards sustainable materials, you know, bio-based materials and applications, you know, in utilize. Even the tire companies are very much into, they're saying 90%, 100% sustainable materials in production of.
That's right. That's right.
Huge potential, yeah.
And that brings us to the processing aid that we developed. You know, so there's some companies. I know that Goodyear, for example, has released a tire, or is distributing a tire that is using like a deresinated soybean oil-based processing aid instead of naphthenic oil. But we ran some trials using a low molecular weight rubber. It was actually Guayule low molecular weight rubber that we made as a replacement for naphthenic oil, and it works beautifully. It works in SBR, and you don't get the same dilution of your mechanical properties that you get with a soybean oil or a naphthenic oil, because those are passive processing aids that are there to modify the viscosity so that you can mix in your materials better, your other additives better. But if you use a low molecular weight rubber, it looks like an oil, but it's an active part of the compound. And so that worked very well. And I know there are people, our companies, I can't remember the name off the top of the head, that make low molecular weight Havea rubber. And I think that might be a very good thing to try while you're waiting for enough Guayule rubber to destroy some of it that way. But that was amazingly effective. That paper should be coming out in the next month or so. Yeah, and from a sustainability point of view, I know at the moment there's only a little bit of movement between synthetic rubber and natural rubber, but natural rubber can be chemically modified and make it closer to some of the synthetic markets. So that's also something I would like to see the natural rubber industry do in terms of the sustainability. You know, you could epoxidize natural rubber. That gets you some of the oil resistance, solvent resistance that it doesn't naturally have. You know, things like that. You could methyl acrylate it. You could do all the basic rubber chemistries to the alternatives and to Havea rubber itself, which would allow you to, say, progressively encroach on the synthetic rubber markets.
Okay, Dr. Katrina, it's really nice to taking inputs on various things happening on the alternative natural rubber, and also get to know about your other research work on the bio-based fillers, and the process aids. Finally, before I let you go, I'd like to ask you how you've been 30 plus years and doing this research on the alternate natural rubber, and look back and now how you see the future of alternative natural rubber.
Well, the way I see the future hasn't really changed a lot from how I've always done. I've always, as soon as I got into this field, I went, we're dependent on tropical clonal rubber, and it's like, and I'm a plant biologist in original background, and it's like that's not a good thing. That is not a good thing. If you look at any other agricultural crop output that we have, they all have backups. If you think, okay, we grow crops for starch. Well, if the corn crop failed, you've got wheat, barley, and potatoes, and hundreds of others. Oil seeds. There's dozens of oil seed crops. There's one rubber crop. And it's grown as clones, genetically identical clones. And in my lifetime, we've seen the elm tree collapse, we've seen emerald ash, we've seen pine beetle, we've seen all of these non-clonal tree species collapse. And so it's just to me, it feels like Havea brasiliensis is this sort of ticking time bomb. And then when we had that major disease spread in 2019, I thought the rubber apocalypse might be upon us. Unfortunately, I think that hasn't happened this time. But I think it's salve is going to get into Southeast Asia one of these days, and salve's still fatal. South American leaf blight, that's a fatal disease. So I just think that we have to have this biodiversity. Now, the future of it, certainly working in the States, this is a tremendously reactive business community or economy, not a proactive one. Nobody wants to pay proactively for something that they'd rather have a huge disaster and then struggle like crazy for 5 years, rather than putting it should be far more expensive than doing it in advance. We know there's going to be a problem. Let's just get everything sorted so that when something bad happens, we're not in a terrible position. But it's very difficult to get the investment for people to say, which is why we've really focused on these premium markets. Get the investment for the radiation attenuation glove, for example. That's far more doable than saying, tire companies, you're going to be in so much pain, you don't even know where you're coming from if you don't put a whole bunch of money in now so we can get this thing scaled to where it's meaningful for tires. You've got to go through these other ones first, and I think it's a more investable proposition. And so I do think it's going to happen, and I do think we're going to see one of these multitude of startup companies pull in a major investment within the next 5 years, hopefully sooner than that, this year possibly, with the disrupted supply chains. And then once we see these commercial plants start going up, then the really important thing is to make sure they stay up and they form a basis of expansion. But it has to be economically viable in normal commercial times. So you might get it up because of what's happening at the moment in Ukraine or COVID, but you've got to make sure that your business plan is viable when things are back to normal, because otherwise it's all going to go away again. And I can't do it a fourth time. I've done Guayule twice and Dandelion once, but I can't do it another time.
Right.
I am getting too old now to do it a fourth time.
I understand. I understand. Katrina, thank you very much. It's really wonderful to having you in this program. It's a lot of learning, and you share a lot of insights. I'm hoping, and people who are audience watching and viewing later on as well, invest in alternate sources, to sustain. I think this is, as you rightly mentioned, the word biodiversity.
I think we could cover the world with rubber crops. We only need 3 to do that. Hevea, Dandelion, Guayule. You grow it everywhere.
Right. Once again.
Okay.
Go on. You conclude. Yeah.
I was just going to say too, and going this route, of course, will use up a lot of carbon. It will help. It's just a tiny blip on the huge challenge, but will be a very positive carbon footprint. Rubber's a terminal sink. Synthetic rubber has a horrible carbon footprint. These will be much better. And the analysis suggests that that Guayule and Dandelion will have about half the carbon footprint that Hevea does. And Hevea is better than the synthetics by far. So these are all going in the right direction, because we have to tilt the whole CO2 accumulation parameter back, or our grandchildren aren't going to have a world to live in, are they? It's going to be worth it anyway. So anyway, I do think that those are very important things to consider as we move forward into the bioeconomy years.
Yes, for the future of our next generation.
Yes.
We need to change our habits. Rightly, look for our generations to stay safe and having the proper resources, to there for them. Yeah. Katrina, once again, thank you very much. Okay, and we catch up again. I'm looking forward to welcome you in the future episodes, and I'll like to introduce those bio-based fillers and all whatever the work you are doing, given this platform also to industry to understand as well. Yeah. Once again, thank you very much.
Happy to. Thank you, Farah.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Okay, guys, that's about the. With Dr. Katrina Cornish, and as you know, she is well-experienced researcher in alternate natural rubber resources. We have, it's just a wonderful discussion to learn about all things happening about the Dandelion and also the Guayule. Okay, let's move to the next part of the program. The final part of the program. Let's have the buyer guide. Have a look at the buyer guide, various sources of the products, technologies. Okay. Okay, that's the rubber industry buyer guide. If you're interested in any of these products and services, you can reach out to them, contact them for the further assistance. Okay, the final part of this today's rubber industry news hour, another rubber industry business talk. Here we have Mr. Michael Verwey, is the director of Guayule, Australia. We talk about Guayule also alternative natural, also is a lot of changes happening in Australia as well. Let's hear about this. What's happening trends in Australia. I had a conversation with him before. Let me show you my conversation with him. Hello everyone, welcome to the Rubber Industry Business Talk. We are here, we're talking about the Guayule rubber and how situation in Australia. We have a guest, Mr. Michael Verwey. He is the director of the Guayule Australia. So we're going to explore about information on the what is situation, how is the progress of this alternate natural rubber, and what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, how can you work with Michael in this alternate natural rubber. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Param.
So it's a pleasure to have you, and it's also we're going to dig into your brain a little bit to understand what is going on. I think the history of the Guayule, in Australia is pretty long ago. Even it's not something very new, but it's pretty long history is there. So before we get into the this subject, what is how situation it is in Australia? Can you talk about your entry into the rubber industry? When did you get into the entry into the rubber? Yeah.
It all started when I worked in regional development in rural Australia, looking for new crops that could be grown. And I worked with the federal government to identify a number of crops. One of them was Guayule. And then I contacted the industries and say, look, do you want us to look at Guayule as an option for rubber? And they were very keen. But it's been a long process from then to now to actually start getting off the ground.
But what kind of reaction you got at the time, when you approached them?
Very strong. We did have rubber manufacturers in Australia at that time, and they were the main supporters. And so was the Australasian Rubber Manufacturers Association. So they were the bones of the rubber industry in Australia, and they were keen to look at an alternative rubber source. And we worked with them, and we worked with the government to try and get it off the ground. Our biggest problem at the time was getting seed, and we relied on getting that from the United States, and that took about 6 years to actually get the seed to start trials. But they've always been the rubber industry has been the backbone of why we even went into it.
But why did it take 6 years long to get? Is it legislations or some restrictions are getting imported into Australia?
Well, we had to build a reputation with the USDA to be able to be trusted by them to get the seed. And that took 6 years. And we also had to do a lot of research on Guayule, on all the reports that had been done in Australia from 1941 onwards, and understand what the crop was about as well. I did come into an arrangement with the Queensland University and Charles Church University in Australia that once we got the seed, they were going to do the trials. And we had a trial at Queensland University from 2000 to 2011. So it was a good understanding of trying to understand what Guayule was about and all the issues we needed to address.
And how is the rubber industry now in Australia? Is it growing, or is it still they're importing a lot of natural rubber from Southeast Asia? What's the situation like?
We have small industries here that have shown quite a lot of interest in Guayule for latex, for the health industry, and natural rubber. But the industries are very small. All the tire manufacturers have actually gone overseas, but they're still very interested in what we're doing. Australia is a very minor player in importing rubber, but 61% of the rubber that's imported is for the mining industry, and they are a very big industry in Australia, generate a lot of wealth for the country, and they're in particular also keen on having an alternative rubber source because it's like an insurance policy. Havea has got a few issues and you rely on one crop, and every industry relies on rubber. You've got to start looking at alternatives to, as a sort of an insurance policy to make sure that rubber keeps coming. And that's what it all is all about.
So let's talk about your company, that Guayule, Australia. So when did you started, and what is the motivation behind? I know you've been working with on Guayule for a long time, and so let's talk about a little bit about the history and what is the purpose of it. What kind of role you want to play, in the long term. I think your objective is not only, I believe, it's not just because Australia itself. I think it's international market. Is it right?
That's correct. That's correct. We were involved at first with Dr. Cornish, Katrina Cornish, and we were actually in a company together. But in 2017, we decided that maybe we should be on our own, work out our own direction, and form partnerships that weren't restrictive. And hopefully then we could actually motivate the industry to go forward. And that has been quite successful. We are still have very good relations with Dr. Cornish and the researchers in the US. But we found that to go forwards, we needed to have companies that had the same ideology as what we did. And that is why we're going to form a partnership with Michel Dorget. Their thinking is the same as what ours is. And I believe the partnership will ensure that Guayule actually has got a very good future.
Yeah. And, we talk about these crops in Australia. I think it's a farmer's business, right? If you want to grow this kind of crops in any country, you need a support from the farmers. Their interest, it's whether it is income sourcing for them, in the long term or short term basis, So, what is the reaction from the farmers when talking about Guayule?
In 2005, Ulix Corporation, who I worked for 3 years, went into Australia to do further trials. And they were working with the cotton growers. Now, farmers are very astute in Australia. When you have a meeting, they bring out their calculators, they bring out their computers, they do their figures and their numbers, and they were keen. And we did set up a number of trials in Queensland. We did the same in Western Australia amongst the cereal growers, because they could see there was a profitable crop, not just for latex and rubber, but for the other products that could come from Guayule plant. So farmers are keen to look at it, and they do their figures. And probably the reason why it never took off before was because we were only looking at rubber at that stage. And even though it's always been classed as a profitable crop, it certainly wasn't as profitable as other options. but now it is also as a companion plant.
So I think you can say good days may come soon, right? More interest from the
I think
farmers.
so.
Yeah.
I think so, and I think what has happened with the strategic plan that the federal government put out, and we were heavily involved in that, is it's staged, it is strategic, and it does require to build partnerships with the farmers, educate farmers, and get involved with all from one end of the market to the other end of the market. And I think the important part is because government is involved now, it has a credibility to start off with, which normally you have to build that up.
And is the central government is involved in developing it, or is state? You have different states, right?
We do. We do. The federal government was the one that actually put the strategic plan together, but I have a relationship with the South Australian Department of Agriculture, and they have a research centre in Loxton, which is in South Australia, and we are working collaboratively to get the whole project going from one end to another, which includes education, which includes demonstration sites, and also incorporating new processes for agriculture so we can analyze the results and we can get more accurate figures on yields and biomass.
Yeah, so that you also get value added products as well as byproducts.
That's correct.
Well. Yeah. So,
correct.
And, you already mentioned briefly about this the strategic plan. I think that I see the report at 2022 to 2027,
Yep.
right? So it's like a 5-year plan. Okay. And what are the, so in briefly, what you want to achieve in this 5 years time? And is it, as I think you are a key player also as a part of that project.
Yes.
Is it right? Yeah.
Well, much of the fundamentals of the strategic plan we're already incorporating. We already have been incorporating for a number of years. What we hope to be able to achieve is use that as just a staging point for the industry. But I look at us being capable of actually setting up the first major commercial site by the year 2027 anyway. So we're only using, it has been interesting to get the feedback from the strategic plan because it is well designed and it gives a proper stage, step-by-stage step to get a good industry going that's got to have credibility and people are going to be comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the importance of the strategic plan.
And does any universities also actively involved in this strategic plan?
The University of Adelaide is very keen to do the plant breeding program. Mm-hmm. We've already come to an agreement about a 5-year initial plan. The University of Western Australia is very keen to do research on the resin because the resin is very important for the construction industry. So universities have always shown an interest in Guayule is pinpointing what part they play. And we're heavily involved in working with the universities in that regard.
Okay. And when it comes to, I don't know, Guayule is people have been seeing it in the US in many places. Whether yields will be similar in Australia and US is going to be similar range of can you talk about comparison about the yields? Because at the end of the day, how much you get a rubber, okay, what kind of value it is when you compare the heavier, with the traditional para rubber. Okay, so can you talk about the yields?
In 2017 we did a business plan and we used financial figures and based on the anticipated yields that we would get. Now in 1981 in Australia, when they did dryland trial in South Australia, they were getting 1.2 tonnes per hectare of rubber. We anticipated that conservatively 1.5. tons per hectare. Some of the new work that's being done at the moment on Guayule is looking at exactly what type of water it requires to optimize yields. And there's a lot of work being done in the US as well to increase yield. So I think that is one area that is going to continue to grow, but because you don't rely on just one product, it is, you know, you're getting your income stream from several areas. And even if it comes to 1 ton per hectare from rubber in dryland conditions, you have to grow a lot of it to make it feasible. And that biomass becomes very good biofuel, which you need volume for anyway.
In this, we talk about a little bit about the biomass. So I think the Australian very strong in waste to energy options, you know, various energy conversion as well. So is it any special consideration of biomass come from the Guayule? You know, any waste management companies are involved in this projects as well?
Not at this stage, but I think they will be. We've been working with a US company that is trying to achieve approval for Guayule biofuel as a jet fuel.
Okay.
And that is proceeding quite well. I don't see any problem. There's been a lot of research done on using cellulose-based plants for biofuel, and I can see Guayule fitting into that quite well.
So let's do a little comparison with the traditional para rubber with Guayule. You know, if you are actually involved, if you had to encourage industries to use it, so what are unique what called USP, right? Unique selling points, for the Guayule.
If we're talking about rubber,
yeah.
I think one of the things we need to acknowledge is that we don't want to take over from Havea. I think you have to protect the growers that are involved in Havea at the moment. But the crop, there are a lot of risks involved. There's climate change, there is the potential of viruses, which I think there is a leaf virus going through. Changing crops from Havea to palm oil. There are all these risks that are with Havea at the moment. And the demand for rubber is growing. The supply is not keeping up with the demand. I see Guayule as filling that gap and not taking over, but filling the gap and I think that's the way we have to think about it. You don't want to displace things, you just want to add value to it.
Sure.
And we've already done quite a bit of work we've had a lot of international rubber companies coming in contact and saying, how can we modify our processes to accommodate Guayule? And you do have to modify, but we say don't get rid of Havea, look at blending Havea and Guayule, and then as things progress, you may decide, well, Havea is becoming a very risky thing, then change your options. But you have to take one stage at a time and don't just throw the baby out with the bath. You try and make things work. That's how I look at things.
And is it ever have anybody does any work on the Guayule, mixing Guayule and traditional Havea rubber together and see how the properties looks like?
Yes, I believe Bridgestone is doing that at the moment. I think there's a couple of companies that are actually making totally Guayule tires, but blending seems to be the thing that seems to be on the table at the moment. And I think if it works, it works. We just have to make sure that industry keeps going, that transport systems keep going, so there's food in the shops, people can eat, because if there is a problem with Havea in the future and there is no alternative, then you've got a real problem.
But why you think is that, you know, the growth and the, you know, the progress of the Guayule is so slow? It's because been talking, when I look at history, 1910, you know, in the US, they started. But Hevia is coming only much later, you know, and of course, because the labor issues, or, you know, the vast expansion of the in Southeast Asian market. What else are the reasons that the slow progress? Because the properties are, I think, pretty much better properties in certain areas, you know, particularly with the allergens, you know, but in the healthcare industry, there are a lot of advantages by Guayule latex, or, you know, so.
Yeah. The problem has been that when there's no urgency, you don't change. Rubber was cheap coming from Southeast Asia, so why bring something else in? It is only now that they're looking at the risk factors associated, and that includes climate change as well. They're putting Guayule in as an insurance policy. And that's the same with dandelion. They're doing the same there. So it is being slow because there was no need. And we had a lot of research done on Guayule in the 40s, 50s, 1970s, and 80s. But every time it was because of a crisis. It was World War II, the oil crisis, and every time there was a recommendation to take the step further. But when the crisis went, so did Guayule. In 1996, Australia's major scientific body, the CSIRO, produced a comprehensive report on Guayule, recommending a 20-year program for plant breeding and to take it up to commercial level. That was never undertaken. So it is only now that, you know, the urgency is coming in about looking for an alternative. And climate change is also forcing farmers to look at their insurance policy, which is don't just grow cotton, grow something to go along with it, so their income streams are protected. Same as the wheat farmers. So it is all starting to come together, but it's all based on urgency rather than anything else.
And you know, you already talked about this dandelion. Is also another source of natural rubber. And is there anything happening in Australia on these shrubs? Yeah.
No, not on dandelion, although I keep in contact with a lot of researchers that are involved there. And I'm not concerned because I think there is a market for all three, because each one has a different strength and a different qualities. And I think they can all fit into the agenda quite well. I think one of the things that is happening too is as oil prices continue to rise and people's attitude to oil is changing, synthetic rubber may actually be cheaper doing it with natural rubber in the future. So, I mean, when you've got over 50% of the rubber produced being synthetic, that leaves quite a margin for the three different rubber sources.
And you are with Ulex also for a certain period, right? And Ulex also very strong in, yeah. And with the Guayule, they are also they did a lot of work as well. So what's happening in this with respect to Ulex?
Ulex is trying to build Guayule industry in Queensland. I worked for Guayule for 3 years doing a number of projects, and they need to be congratulated for a lot of the work they did in the initial stages. But I think this strategic plan where we're sort of moving the whole process forward is going to be very beneficial to Ulex as well, because once credibility is there, farmers are educated, then it is easier for them to also enter the Australian market. Farmers are very cluey, but they're also very hesitant. So they've got to be sure they're going to deal with a credible crop and dealing with credible organisations before they'll commit. And that is where working with government as well gives that edge.
And is the government is offering any incentives for the farmers to get into, because you have now the strategic plan,
Yep.
okay, and as part of the strategic plan, of course, at the end of the day, the farmers' involvement is the main thing, right? So that more people grow this. And is the government has some incentive plan to support this strategic plan?
Farmers don't get incentives. They look at totally as a business opportunity. And if the business is right, they'll get involved. What we're looking at is not only the Loxton, we're looking at putting a number of sites, trials in different farmland in for dryland growing. Let that become the centre for that region for farmers to have a look at, become accustomed to Guayule, learn about it, so that we can expand very quickly. Because picking the right farmers is also going to be a very important issue. And so it's all trying to mend it all together.
And you know, see, in Asia and Southeast Asia, it's all about available land, right? You know, growing the rubber industry, rubber plantation. Even in, how about in Australia? There's a lot of land available to grow this Guayule. You know, of course, people don't want to convert quickly. You know, if they have, you know, there is a called comfort zone. If things are moving forward, keep it that way.
Yep.
You know, yeah. So, what is the situation about land availability? How much you think there's a possibility of, you know, for the Guayule? Yeah.
Australia is bigger than the whole of Europe. It is tropical as well as arid, the Mediterranean land. The majority of it in Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and even Queensland is very adaptable to Guayule. It's been trialled there, very good results. So land is no object. The other thing is, because farms are very big and they're mechanized, they can use what they use for cotton and for cereal growing, their equipment, just modified for Guayule. So there's not a major issue that you need new equipment. So land is no issue. Being mechanized is very beneficial. You're dealing with a lot fewer farmers to make a commercial crop than what you would elsewhere. The interest that France, Michel Dorget, and the American companies have in Australia is the fact that there is land, and there's a lot of land that is suitable for Guayule. So that is no issue.
So if all goes well, Australia is probably the largest producer of Guayule. You know, is it right? Because the land and the climate conditions are suitable. You know, so yeah.
We have had a lot of interest from Indonesian and European companies, and also companies from Pakistan and India into Guayule in Australia, because I know that we have the capacity to do the volume, and that is important because you've got to have volume to make it all worthwhile. So yes, they have already done their homework. They know that Australia is well suited, probably the most suited country to grow Guayule in volume. And that's why we're getting a lot of contacts at the moment, but they're all waiting for something definite to go in the ground.
Yeah.
And I can understand that.
It's, and I think even even the Bridgestone, I think many of the tire companies also actively involved in growing this alternate source of, you know, natural rubber. I know that there are no companies are manufacturing in Australia now, but are there any tire companies that wanted to get invested into the, you know, Guayule in Australia?
We have, well, Bridgestone originally was very much involved in research in the 1970s and 80s, before they went to the US. we have companies in Indonesia. I can't name the companies because I think it'd be unfair, but there's quite a few in Europe and Indonesia and India that are showing quite a bit of interest. Some of them have been here before, manufacturing. Some of them, to be quite honest, it's the first time I've heard of them. But there is a definite interest, and they've done their homework.
Super. So I see all the bright future if all goes smoothly with as per the strategic plan
Yep.
for Guayule. So
Yeah.
what
think
is
so.
the,
Sorry.
go on, yeah, please.
I think one of the other things that we have to look at with the strategic plan is when we go forward, we have to recognize what skills we need to take the company even further, because I recognize I can take it to a certain level, but then you need different skills to take it even further. So that is also part of the strategic plan that we've got in place.
And is the processing, is it different from the traditional natural rubber, Guayule latex?
It can be. It's usually done water-based,
Yep.
and that is why we have a connection with the French company, with Michel Dauger, because what we'll be looking at is that technology to come to Australia for the processing, extraction processing. We also have very good relations with Ulex Inc. and Katrina Cornish's company, who have also offered license agreements if we want to take their equipment on. So it's not just us going alone. We're actually working with quite a number of international people to make sure that the capacity is there to take it further.
You know, do you think it's necessary to have an association or focusing on the Guayule, so that it can all the stakeholders come together and support this segment? Just like in natural rubber, we have ANRPC, Association of Natural Rubber Producer Countries, and there are IRSG. There are many organizations involved with promoting the heavier type natural rubber. Do you think is it good to have a kind of a group, a working group internationally, so that this can, what is your opinion there?
I would hope so. I think we have to take every step as it comes along, because I think everyone that's involved in Guayule are trying to find their feet on how to work together and how to progress. So it's early stage, even though Guayule's been around for a long time. The companies that are now taking it further are really only finding their feet on working together and how to progress that. So I'm totally open to it. And I think that is the only way Guayule is going to progress further, because I like working with the US researchers and the French researchers. I learn a lot, and they need, in some respects, me, because logistically, if they want to come to Australia, I've got the knowledge there. And working collaboratively, you can actually do very well. So I agree with you there.
So finally, I will ask about what are your goals for the Guayule Australia? How you're going to see the next 10 years of, what is your plans?
The plans for Guayule Australia is to put the strategic plan that the government has done into place. But I am looking at us being our first major commercial site by 2027, and also to start growing it under dryland conditions for rubber. We're already getting a lot of interest from mining companies who actually want to be involved in the growing of Guayule. So I think there's going to be quite a pace to get it going. It's a matter of the first step is going to be the hardest, and that's what we're going to aim for.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best, and I'm sure that I see the Guayule get a lot of progress in the next couple of years' time, particularly as you mentioned about strategic plan by 2027. I look forward to see the commercial plant, extracting the latex from Guayule. Michael,
And
thank you very much.
thank you very much for the interview. Much appreciated.
Okay. I'd like to keep you in contact, and so that we can share the updates on what's happening in Guayule in the future programs as well.
That'll be very good. Michael,
once again, Michael, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your insights into what's happening in Australia. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the story about Australia. I'm hoping that you find it interesting. So we have come to the end of this episode of the Rubber Industry NewsHour. I want to thank all the speakers, and Mr. Jim Jacob and Dr. Katrina Cornish, Dr. Michelle, and also Michael Verwey, contributing on what is happening in the natural rubber market. Particularly this session is very special for us, that I'm talking about alternate natural rubber. Okay. Thank you all for joining this session today. And if you wish to see this program again, you know where to find it. And this is available on the Technology channel. Tomorrow, in the next 24 hours time, we'll be uploading into the YouTube. So feel free to watch it on YouTube. Thank you all once again for joining this session. And if you have any comments, suggestions, feedback on this NewsHour program, you know how to reach me. This is my contact information. I see you next Monday. So thank you very much. Bye for now.